This entire weekend, I have been toddler level tired. And what I mean by that is by 9 p.m., I'm ready to cry and whine over the fact that I'm not in my bed yet. Hi, everybody! I'm Moo. I am a college student who is very into reading, and I'm here to share it with all of you. So, welcome! I don't know how high resolution this video is going to be because it's always a lot lower quality than what I see while I'm filming. But if you see a dot on my nose, I'm aware it's there. Yeah, my nose is still giving me trouble, so just pretend it doesn't exist. Without much intro, let's get into the book. Today, we are going to be reviewing Slaughterhouse 5 by Kurt Von Gut. I think that's how you say it. I have been trying to figure out how to say it the entire time I read this book, and I never really did. So I'm just gonna say Kurt Von Gut instead of looking it up because I'm gonna pretend that I know. So unlike a lot of my past books, this is one that you've probably heard of because it's a classic. So I'm going to make this video pretending that the audience knows nothing about the book, but I think it will still be enjoyable if you have read this book yourself as well. So yeah, let's get started. We'll start with the summary. Slaughterhouse 5, an American classic, is one of the world's great anti-war books, centering on the infamous firebombing of Dresden. Billy Pilgrim's odyssey through time reflects the mythic journey of our own fractured lives as we search for meaning in what we fear most. Short but sweet. So I was initially interested in this book because it was a book about war, and I am pretty interested in war books, surprisingly. I have a great fascination with war and the Holocaust and all that, and it's mostly to understand what happened, all these horrible things, and become fascinated by the evils of the past while advocating that nothing like this happens in the future. I think we're all very aware that history repeats itself, but let's work hard together to make sure that some aspects of history stay history. This was marketed as an anti-war book, but there is so much more than that, and it very much surprised me because I went in only thinking it was an anti-war book. I knew nothing about it beforehand, and it's actually not. It is anti-war, yes, but it's also sci-fi, and if I knew that it was sci-fi, I might not have even picked up this book, so I'm really glad that it was marketed only as an anti-war book written by a veteran rather than, sci-fi. The book follows Billy Pilgrim, kind of a stand-in for the author who did experience the bombing in Dresden that he described in the book. In this novel, Billy Pilgrim is someone who can travel through time, and he knows what happens in the future, he knows what happens in the past, he kind of just shifts whenever he feels like it. And it goes to different parts in his life, be it in war times, or when he was a child, or afterwards with his wife. There's even a point in which he's on another planet with these crazy aliens that look like plungers. Billy lives in his own mind, traveling to these points in his life. Now, throughout this book, it was quite obvious that Billy was suffering from a mental illness of sorts. In fact, he goes to a mental health facility to help him. But since the perspective was Billy Porter's, or at least centered around Billy Porter, all of the events that were happening, the time travel, the going to a different planet, the learning about different aspects of time, was seen as real. And they are real in the mind of this mentally ill person who most likely got hurt in the war or suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder, and all of this time travel stuff and aliens and all that came from that. It's always really interesting to see a take on mental health from the 1960s, because back then, if someone was a little crazy or if they strayed from what was normal, you'd just lock them up and call them crazy, and they'd just be sitting in a building for the rest of their life. It also makes me grateful that I wasn't alive in this time, because with all the stuff I'm dealing with, I'd probably be locked away real quick, because they didn't understand really any mental health. In the 1960s, they were still cutting parts out of people's brains and shutting them up in buildings forever. I would probably be part of that based on the things that I've gone through in the past when I was too anxious to even leave my house. So I'm pretty sure I'd be in there, and that would not be fun. So it was interesting to see an actual look on mental health published in the 1960s about someone living through the 1940s. Despite it being an anti-war book and a book centering around a very mentally ill character, it was a really funny book. I don't think it's for everyone, because his humor is kind of something that you would either be into or not, because it's a little PG-13, but I found it really funny. In fact, I listed a ton of quotes in my book. I'm not gonna bring it any closer, but there's a lot of stuff in there. Most of those quotes I will not repeat, but some of my favorites that are funny are, "It was a crazy, sexy, murderous relationship Weary entered into with the people he eventually beat up," or, "The most destructive untruth is that it is very easy for an American to make money," or one of the more out there ones is, "He had a tremendous wang, incidentally. You never know who will get one." It's just things like that that make me go, okay. It was very entertaining to read despite being about a difficult topic, and I think that he hit the balance perfectly. Like, there's a reason it's a classic. I used to think of classics as books that people would read in school. I will no longer think that way because of this book. You do not want to let even high schoolers read this book in class, because they're going to just go wild with it. But either way, I found it really funny. I really liked it. It definitely made me laugh on a lot of occasions. Back to the more serious topics, there was a quote that kind of took me by surprise, because it's something that I think about a lot these days, and it definitely took me by surprise and made me ponder a bit. It says on page 108, "The visitor from outer space made a serious study of Christianity to learn, if he could, why Christians found it so easy to be cruel." And that really hit me. I want to say right now, I am a Christian. I believe in God and I go to church and all that. But I also want to say, I don't care who you are, what you do with your life. My only requirement is to be a good person. So as long as you're a good person, you're welcome here, you're safe to express yourself however you want, just be a good person. As a Christian myself, I've often wondered how Christians can be so cruel in so many situations, especially since I myself am so invested in Christianity myself. It makes me wonder, are we reading the same thing? Because overall, our main goal is to be loving, As Christians, you're supposed to love your neighbor as yourself. You're supposed to present yourself as a loving person. And I know that a lot of people that aren't Christian in this day and age see it as a judgmental, hateful religion. And I really hate that. It was very interesting to me to know that people have viewed Christianity that way for so long. And it saddens me, I won't lie, but at the same time, it makes me want to present myself better. I want to be a good person, not just because it's what God would want, but because that's the right thing to do. I think above all, as a person, you should be accepting, loving, and compassionate. And that's what I'm going to put forward. I don't want to be part of the cruel stereotype that people see today. So that really hit me. I know that it kind of went into a weird path. I know that if you're not Christian, you may not have enjoyed that part, but I'm not going to hide that part of who I am. I'm not going to preach to you or anything like that, but I'm also not going to hide that part of myself because I want to present myself completely as who I am rather than hide an important part of me. But with that said, overall, it is a mostly silly book written by somebody who needed to process what he went through in World War II, and I really like it. It makes a ton of sense why it's a classic, and I think that it's a good read for anyone who wants to go through classics as I have found myself doing. Big stretch. On to who I would recommend this book to. I would recommend this book to people who love historical fiction, people who like science fiction, people who want to explore the classics, and people who are into war and war history. And just a clarification, I mean that as in like people who are into true crime. It's just people who are fascinated by that. I don't promote war in any way. If it were up to me, the world wouldn't need a military, but there are evil, violent people in the world, so the military is here to protect us. But it's not my favorite thing ever. But yes, this is who I would recommend the books to, and if you're in any of those categories, you should check it out. I feel like I've recommended a lot more to people who love historical fiction than I thought I would, because I didn't really think I read that much, but now using these videos and looking back, it seems like I kind of am. Even right now, I'm reading a book that's set in the 80s, and that's almost 40 years ago. I wouldn't call that historical fiction, definitely not. But there's not much contemporary fiction that I read, I guess. It's all either fantasy or historical, so I found that very interesting. Anyways, that's all from me today. That was a lot, kind of. I almost didn't film today, but I got a burst of energy, so I'm really glad that I did end up filming. I didn't really realize that I'd have so much to talk about in this little book. Isn't that interesting? I could read a 300-page book and have very little to say, but this book that just barely crossed over 200 pages, I have loads to say about. Either way, if you liked the video, consider liking it. If you liked this video, also consider subscribing. I'm actually doing a lot better than I thought I would in these first couple weeks, so I'm really happy. If you have anything you'd like to say, make sure to comment down below. I love reading comments, and I would love to respond to them if they are something that I can respond to. You could ask questions, you could give feedback, anything works for me. So yeah, that's all for today. I hope you guys have a lovely day. This has been Moo, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye! And it goes into different ass